That beard? Is there a reason why there's pens like this? You did?
He threw it at me.
I wanted to see if you would notice it.
If I know, so I get points for that? Notice Henry's
It's
beard
season
too.
What?
Notice this beard you got rocking there.
I gotta shave. It's just laziness. It's not an intentional choice.
Laziness is an intentional choice, isn't it?
That's a really good point.
That's good, Coach.
Jeez. Alright, I'm off to a great start this spring. Alright. Man, I don't know how to come back from that.
Really vague.
So far, yes. How the first, I mean, I know you guys were doing non-padded or less padded, but
Yeah.
how has everything started out so far?
Well, I've been overall very pleased with really our 8 weeks of winter conditioning, weight room conditioning wise, what we're able to do and meet with our players and install. It's been exciting to as we have as many new players as we have, there's a lot to kind of orientate them into, get them on how we do things. All that to me has gone very smoothly and probably better than even anticipated. I like where we're at. This is a later start for us in spring ball. It gave us a full 8 weeks in the weight room, and I think we've seen some great dividends off of that and changes in the body composition and strength and a lot of different things there. We did decide, many times, in spring practice, you get to a certain point and you feel like you got everything kind of installed and you got a lot of things accomplished, and then you're just really practicing and hoping you stay healthy and you start looking at it. So we took a little different approach, and we took the first 2 helmet practices, so to speak, and the spider pads, and we put them in the front in what we do with team tech periods, which is just more individual instruction and lining up on air and doing things like that, and counted those as our first couple practices. So that really we limited some of that early 11 on 11 banging that you do without the shoulder pads on, and save that for today. And it's something we're going to look at a few other things of doing differently, that we can be a better football team, be a better healthy football team, be a better football team down the stretch, and that was one of the first things. So all those things have been good.
What was the motivation for that? I mean, I guess you touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, it again, part of it, and I can go back and probably some things there. When this first started with the schedule, I was, from my chair, very, I don't want to use optimistic. I was planning that we'd get a week 0 game, and that didn't happen. Okay, and that's probably another topic for another press conference. But because of that, I looked at the total. I was looking at the volume that our team was going to have over time, and to me, I've heard some of the teams that have gone overseas and done things that sometimes when they look at that, they looked at what spring would be like as well, and some of that started with that. But as I also said is, a lot of things, we know that we've got to find ways to win close football games. We got to find ways, to be a better football team, and I'm not doing my job if I'm not keeping an open mind on a lot of different things, and this is one that we wanted, that we thought was a good idea. It fell into where it's at, and now we're going to practice these rest of these practices in a little more condensed format, and and evaluate it as we go.
And then just lastly, what have the early returns been on some of the staff changes and shifts that you've made? I know there aren't that many, but how have they borne?
I'm pleased about it. Ty Woe, I think there's some things that we've been able to do special teams wise, and him just concentrating there is going to be and Kyle Dween and Aaron Miller that help him kind of allow us to do some other things that allow them to run that mainly without as much other lead coaches as much as anything. That's going to help us kind of concentrate ourselves from there. I think that's been very beneficial. Joe's done a nice job with the edge player, with the defensive end players. Don't call them edge like some people. We still call them defensive ends. And of course, and then what Andy's brought back to this program and things have definitely accelerated us in a lot of things that we're doing. Again, and how we're going about it. he's been instrumental in some thoughts on some of the things that we've made slight changes, or, and really we've kind of evolved ourselves into, I know you guys don't get to see a lot of it, but we used to 2 huddle and rapid fire plays at the defense. Now with the staffing models the way they are, we can go 2 separate groups, and some of that kind of slows down a little bit of the chaos at times, but we're still getting the ball in reps and that, so all that's been good.
Kind of building off that, you mentioned it a little bit, but with Andy, how's that transition been like? Has it been seamless in him coming back?
Yeah, I think, definitely, I think along with that offensively, there's enough guys in the room that he had worked with, and, just rapid, going through it, Terry and Jonathan were with him. Obviously, Z was with him. Daryl hadn't worked here at Kansas with him. Matt was part of what we were doing from a remote analyst spot. So a lot of that, and then Bill Quaiser coming back as assistant line coach, had been here and been with Andy at Penn State. Steven Matos was with us. So a lot of good carryover there with guys that have kind of made that. We've changed some terminology, streamlined it, kind of meshed some things from the past that have hopefully they're going to kind of help us. I'm sure those are things that he implemented when he was at Penn State, that try to take some of the things he was doing here to mesh with what they're doing, and some of those, make sense in making it more simplistic. I said sometimes we get a little wordy in calls, so we're trying to make that better. All those things have been really good, and it's been great seeing. As I keep saying, Jim Zabrowski's been above and beyond professional in the change, and excited about his opportunity just to focus on these quarterbacks and get us ready.
Yeah, and it's kind of early, but what's the biggest difference you feel so far from this season, Scott, to last year's?
It's hard to dive into all that since it's so early. Again, right now, I think some things that we see, I think we're gonna, I think there's some positions that we're gonna have a little more depth and feel confident that, and what I hope that translates to that depth is that we rotate more during the game. As all of us and you guys as well, as you look for those, sometimes analyzing, critiquing fourth quarter losses, is it our guys on the field too much? Are we there? What are we doing? How do we practice? Everything's there. So I'm thinking, as we look at it, I'm looking forward to the competition at the linebacker spots. I think we have some really talented and depth at the safety position. I like the new additions up front, which is already a rotational position. I think those things are going to help us there. Offensively, I like some of the size we've added in the offensive line. I think we've got some talented running backs that are going to give us different styles of play. I like the receivers there. I think Nick McMillan came out today and had a very fine day, and Najee Cox showed his ability to make plays. Cam Pickett's extremely consistent and will be a primary guy in this offense. So all those things are there as we continue to put the pieces together.
Real quick, going back to the number of practices, how many do you plan on doing that are going to be like fully padded versus some of the more?
Right now, I think we got to do one more. Other than that, we'll be in pads the whole time. Yeah, so we'll be in pads a lot.
And then when you look back at the evaluations you guys did after the season, or kind of maybe some of the areas that you really felt like, okay, hey, during spring practice, we really want to focus on this.
Well, again, as you're looking at it, when you lose guys and you're adding, you're almost starting. I don't want to say starting over, but there's a lot there to work on. So if you're talking more schematically or philosophy-wise, or we're doing, again, we've got to continue, and we did it last year, and we'll continue to emphasize is situational football, playing football, and sometimes and I think we've been doing that. We'll continue to do more. Is that this isn't just a team run period. This isn't just a team pass period. These are going to be down and distance, more competitive type situations that we're going to look at. So we're more aware of down and distance, and creating that is honestly a balance, because kids know it's still practice, right? There's another play coming in 40 seconds, that no matter what the outcome, but you want to try to get that, and so we become more aware. I think again, defensively, we talked about it in here a lot. I think we're on a great path and starting as far, our communication has gotten a lot better. And for what we have to do to be able to communicate on defense, to be on the same page, that is going to be very vital to what we do, and I think our guys have embraced that.
You maybe mentioned it there, I know we talked last year about transitioning defensive scheme and stuff.
Mhm.
How much of the portal do you feel like really can help expedite that versus in the past, or maybe you had to have 4 years of high school recruiting to transition?
Yeah, you have a chance to bring in older players. I think when you look at, I might have said it in here, and the last press conference, again, you look at the teams that played for the national championship, the average experience age of the starters on each side of the ball were over 4 years. So whether they were extended eligibility or if they were redshirted or whatever, what that is, guys are playing with older guys. And then the balance in today's college football is that we still want to be able to recruit high school players and develop them, but yet a lot of people are playing with older players. So again, we ended up doing that through the portal. Like our linebacker recruiting, we got a lot of one-for-one guys. It wasn't really planned that way, but it's like who fits, who's available, and where it's at, you end up with that. So again, I think that gives us some of the things that we look for, experience, and some guys that have been on the field. And one thing about, if there is things that people do like about portal recruiting is you usually have proven college football snaps to evaluate versus projection.
Lance, you mentioned the physical development that guys have made. Are there any players back from last season who really stood out to you?
Oh man, I'm gonna forget guys as you go through that. That's a good question, but you know, I'm gonna give you some names that probably we don't talk about much in here. A guy like Andre Harper, who was redshirted last year as a transfer from Northwest Missouri State. Every day I look at him, his body's changed immensely. Antonio Wilson was somebody we brought in last summer from the junior college ranks. Another guy that moves better, and you see it in him. Again, I still think through our body composition stuff, there's guys that have done a really good job. I think Trey Lathan has really had you know, probably the first 2 to 3 weeks coming off break a little bit slower, but I think the last 4 to 5 weeks he's really put together some good days in this program. You know, Leroy Harris continues to develop there. A younger player like Garrett Martin, I like where he's at. A lot of guys there that I could go through and kind of do it, but you know, trying to hit some of the ones that come to mind quickly.
You mentioned Trey. Just how valuable is it to have him back, and just what's his sort of
Extremely important to have Trey back. You know, he's a lead tackler. You know, he played about the most snaps for us last year. You know, very consistent. A guy that very instinctive, knowledgeable. He's got a good feel for the game as a whole, and for where for what you need and what you have coming back. And again, not an overly vocal guy, but he's been working on that, just like Blake Harold, Jalen Todd, some guys. There's not a ton of vocal guys on defense, and some of these guys have really worked hard at maybe stepping out of their comfort zones to help lead our defense, because those guys I just mentioned, along with a guy like Taylor Davis, understand the need for somebody that's been in this program to help take another step. Alex Bray's been one of those guys. Alex is another guy that's really had a good off season as well in what we're doing. So
Trey, someone who thought about leaving in the back. Just how confident were you that you'd be able to get him back?
you know, again, anytime someone has thoughts of going through that, you're trying to find the ways to make sure you explain what the you know, why it's in their best interest to stay and where that's at. Sometimes you don't know until they tell you, and things like that. It's you know, he was, you know, communicated well with us on things, on where it was at, and I think we got it to a good spot, and I'm awful glad that he's here. I think a lot of Trey Lathan. I really do, on and off the field, and I know it's going to be important for us to make sure he's healthy this year for us.
in terms of the offense, have you identified anybody or maybe somebody kind of surprised you in stepping up in a leadership role in this offseason?
You know, I think the quarterbacks have naturally done that. We've talked about Cole doing that for a long time. Isaiah's had the ability to through play and other ways to get people to really rally around him with his, you know, his moxie and everything that he has about him. I think he's worked more on his vocal part and understands he needs to do that. Probably Calvin Clements is the guy that's really become more vocal and is embracing that role there as much as anyone, and offensive line wise. Amir Herring has done that as well, but a Calvin probably the one I'd maybe go to there.
Lance, when you talk about the evaluation of the whole operation that you did heading into the offseason and are probably still doing, when you approach that, are you looking at, hey, when we find A, B, and C, we're gonna fix A, B, and C, or is it more, let's find what we find and then kind of prioritize
Well,
what we need to fix?
It moves so fast, Matt, and you've got to try to find the best players that fit. I don't know if this guy's always going to, you know, case in point, I guess hopefully I'm answering it right for you, is that, like Emmanuel Henderson answered a definite speed thing for us last year, okay? Dylan Edwards gives us speed and quickness and big playability. You know, that we saw that, okay? The two other running backs, Jalen and Yasin, you know, those are bigger backs. So we're kind of looking for the best of both worlds in that. Again, I'm sure we'll talk a lot about this, guys, and as we go through this, but, you know, whether it be, we can say, a better coaching decision or a different play going our way, we can pick 4 plays, 2 of each last 2 years, and the majority of your questions would be different. Wouldn't they? I mean, you know, a ball rolling on the ground and 9 guys are around, we don't pick it up. You know, we have a chance to make an interception or do it, or convert a first down, or go for it on 4th down and elect not to, and put the game away. Whatever those are, we can pick them out. You guys probably have a better list than I do. But if we do that, is it as broken as what some may feel? And that's also, you know, when you're close, you've got to make sure that you're looking at it closely. I can't stand up here and be defensive, but I'm not going to blow it up either. Does that make sense? And that we keep finding the ways to do it, and you keep coaching it, and you keep finding a way, and eventually they go back to being your way.
Yeah. Do you think that in your career, this offseason was maybe the closest or the most scrutiny you've ever given to your whole program and looked at it with that kind of depth, or have you done that before? To this level?
Probably not. Maybe close. I know, you know, and sometimes it can be, if you're stubborn or not, and I can be stubborn. I can, you know, and in those things, share a little story is that when our second year at Buffalo, an administrator come and asked me if I was going to make it. We were 2-10. We were 2-8 at the time. Mm-hmm. And he essentially came in and asked me if I was going to make any staff changes. And I won't say exactly what I said back first, but I'll tell you off the record someday. But he essentially was asking me if I was going to fire Andy, is what he was asking me. And I said no. And then Andy became one of the hottest coordinators in the country. And again, it's so when you're looking at it, you're trying to, you know, you're trying to tweak, and you know, there's places around the country where they're firing 4 or 5 coaches a year to shake and make sure people stay on their toes, and that's a head coaching philosophy. But I try to take a holistic one on what we can do better, and continue to understand that the difference between winning and losing is very, very slim, and we've got to find a way to do that. But I would say that year was one. I said, you know, back when I was Division III coach, we won 46 straight games, and we went 7-3, and they called it a disastrous season. Now that disastrous season did force me to look at some different things. We ended up, not through my choice per se, but there was some staff changes, and Andy and Daryl were two of the guys that came and joined us, and then we went on to win our next 30 games before we left. So things happen, but like I said, everything that we are doing, from recruiting and how we're looking at it, we just went through, we've got a fair amount of guys coming in Saturday. We've got to be able to be coachable and understand how we can tweak things, from recruiting to how we run practice to how we go about our days in the office, and how we put together game plans and be receptive to it and understand. And I think we've got a group of guys that are going to do that.
As a pretty good quarterback competition's gonna be going on, how do you guys go about just watching that, evaluating?
Yeah, again, John, I was waiting for that one to come. You must have got assigned that question from the guys up front. You know, we've got to give those guys a lot of reps, and that's one of the things that we got to look at and analyze each and every day of, okay, you're giving them both opportunities with different guys, and that's the thing that you got to balance in this. Who are they working with? Who are they throwing? Who's protected? What are the, you know, what are they up against? But, you know, it's not much different than any other things. Is we grade it all. Okay, we chart percentages. We're looking at it. We're trying to look at it again, whether it be drops or missed targets, whatever that is, and again, the intangible things of leading a group, seeing things defensively, getting us in, all that's going to be, and it's, you know, and I might as well answer it now. We do not, and have not discussed when we are going to name a starter. So if that's coming in, like, I don't know, it's not planned to be named this spring at this time, if you're wondering that. Could it? I don't know, you know, but I don't have a timetable in mind about when we're going to do that.
You mentioned the linebackers, a lot of new portal guys,
Mhm.
that's something you went after. What do you see from them?
Again, I think, you know, the height and length and some of the things overall, I think we've added some. We've got some guys that have played a fair amount of football, some in reserve roles and doing things. It's an athletic, I think it's going to be a physical group. There's going to be, I think what we have to do once now that we got pads on, what do they really do? What do they do well? And how can we utilize them? You know, who's going to be our better blitzers? Who's our better cover guys? What are we going to do? What's the mixing and matching to get the right guys on the field? Can we play more with three linebackers at time, or will it still be strictly like we were mostly last year, playing with more of a 4-2 with a nickel? All those type of things are going to be there, that one's going to be interesting. It really is. The safety one's going to be a little more difficult because we got a few guys banged up and not as many guys going right now that can go live and full. They're doing some partial stuff, and that makes that one a little more difficult.
Lance, as you look to Dylan Edwards, how have you seen his progression over the offseason in this offensive scheme?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
As you look to Dylan Edwards, how have you seen his progression over the offseason into this offensive scheme here?
You know, as everyone knows, you know, really throughout the state, and Dylan's a very talented football player, and to watch him come in here, and he's come in here wanting to fit in, and he's done a great job not trying to come in and do anything over the top, and just be like everyone else in the building, and he's done a great job of that. He has shown a skill set that is very unique, and he has shown that at his two other schools that give us an opportunity to be, and that I know Andy and the rest of the offensive staff will be very creative, and he showed that today already out on the field. His ability in the return game, everything is pretty dynamic, and he's a smart football player. I think he's picked things up, and he's done the necessary things to do that. The first month or so here, he was very limited yet from the injury and everything there, but once he's been given the full go, it's been exciting to watch him, and I think our fans are going to enjoy watching him play.
Since you alluded to it earlier, how likely did you think it was going to be that Middle Tennessee game would be moved to week 0, and how can you make the most of the schedule that you ended up with?
I thought we were gonna say that for another day. I'll do it when you shave, how about that? No,
It's
no.
fresh in your mind, you know?
So say it again now, what now, I thought anytime you left the country to go play a game internationally, if you wanna say what it is, that you could get a week 0 game. That's why I always understood it. I guess not the NCAA and the oversight committee that looked at it got inundated with all these other games now that everybody wanted to play week 0, so they just bunched them all together and they declined ours. So, through the cooperation of Middle Tennessee and everyone else, because that was scheduled for week 3, we had to get some things that you have to work through their conference scheduling, our conference scheduling, and Scott Draper. All these people had to put some things together to make that happen. That what will that be, week 5 that we play them? So it took a lot, and it took a lot more than what I thought was really going to happen.
You alluded to injuries a couple of times. Are there any players you expect to be limited or maybe not even full participants throughout football?
Well, you probably know a few, so you want to. So Austin Alexander's not going through spring. He had a surgery. Jalen Dupree is not going through spring. He had a surgery. E.J. Cannon had surgery. He will not be going through spring. Who else am I missing in there? That's about it at this time. Few others. All the rest are, and you guys see it when you're out there. Anybody in the yellow jerseys in a non-contact situation, and it will be highly limited going through that. Joseph Credit's one of those. Malachi Curvey's one of those. Kai Cummings is one of those. Saeed's one of those. Mason Ellis is one of those. Decently on offense right now, but most of those guys are defensive guys and stuff that have had some. So, okay.
Anything else, Coach?
Anything else?